Went over to baseball at the time of recording, June 19th. It was yesterday that baseball legend Willie Mays passed away. A little bit before my time, but I'm pretty sure these guys have some fond memories of Willie Mays. Barry, I'll start with you. Barry Lewis, I'll start with you about Willie Mays.
Well, some personal Willie Mays memories. And again, I got in on his career. I started following baseball towards the latter part of his career, so I missed his prime years. But my first Willie Mays memory was I was on a vacation and bought a figurine, the first baseball player figurines I ever bought. Was in a store in Michigan. About my mom bought for me a Willie Mays, Lou Brock, and a Tim McCarver. And when we got home to Tulsa, I showed them to my dad, who's a big Willie Mays fan. And somehow on the way home, we lost the cap for Willie Mays. And my dad thought, well, that's appropriate because Willie Mays is always losing his cap when he goes to make catches. So I thought that was pretty cool. And everyone talks about his Polo Grounds catch in the 1954 World Series. Of course, great play. Everyone's seen that. Of course, that was way before my time. But the catch and the play, the moment that stands out most for me with Willie Mays was on the first Saturday afternoon NBC Game of the Week game from the 1970 season. Ironically, that was the day the ill-fated Apollo 13 mission blasted off. But in baseball that day, the Giants were playing the Reds at Candlestick Park. And this was at a time I hadn't really had a chance because the Giants weren't they weren't on TV all the time. Very like most teams, if you weren't in a major league market, you didn't get to see a lot of games. So this was a rare chance to see Willie Mays. And early in the game, the Reds' Bobby Tolan hits a drive. It looks like could be a home run. Willie Mays races up against the chain link fence. And he's 38, almost 39 at the time. He soars in the air, collides with the right fielder, Bobby Bonds, and pulls the ball down, saving a home run as they wind up all tangled up. Just a sensational, underrated catch and great play from Willie Mays' career. So those are the two Willie Mays moments that stand out to me.
That's one of the most fearless catches I've ever seen, Barry. And thank goodness that fence was pliable, right? Or both guys would have been in the hospital. I mean, it was a violent collision. It was probably the most violent collision I've ever seen where the catch was actually made. But Willie Mays, I think I mentioned to you guys when we were chatting before the show that my favorite team sport athlete ever is Michael Jordan, and my number two guy is Willie Mays, and he's my favorite baseball guy ahead of Adrian Beltre. And I grew up reading Willie Mays books like Barry. His prime years preceded me and Barry Lewis's or all of our abilities to watch and understand baseball. But I guess what really strikes me about Willie's offensive numbers is that he hit 660 home runs, and he was number two until he was passed by. He was number two behind Babe Ruth for a long time until he was passed by Henry Aaron. And then, but you think about the garbage ballparks he played in, the Polo Grounds, where unless you hit it right down the line, either way, it was 480 feet to dead center field at Polo Grounds. And then he played at Candlestick where, the air was just terrible and the ball didn't travel well. And he had 600, he would have had an additional 100 home runs, Barry, if he'd have played in a more home run friendly park easily, I would think, considering the length of his career. And I would say too, to anybody who's younger who wants something more relatable to today, I would just say Willie Mays, if he were 24 years old today, he would be destined to become the first $1 billion team sport athlete. It'd be Willie Mays. Because if you think Shohei Ohtani's great, and he is, but Willie Mays was the greatest player of all time. Not the greatest outfielder, not the greatest center fielder. He's the best baseball player who's ever lived.
When I think of Willie Mays, I think back to July 12th, 1970. I was 9 years old. My dad and mom took me and my brothers to the Astrodome. We got to see the Giants play the Astros. Willie Mays had 2 hits that night, got up to 2,998 hits. For crying out loud, I missed his 3,000th hit by 2 little hits. So when I was 9 years old in central Oklahoma, 1970, Willie Mays still was a magic name. And growing up, you know, Mickey Mantle retired after the 68 season. I was following baseball on a limited scale, but the two names you knew were Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays. Mays kept playing a few years. He wasn't the same Willie Mays, but you knew he was still one of the all-time greats. Barry Lewis talked about the catch of Vic Wirtz in 1954. You've seen it across social media, you know, multiple times the last day or so. That catch was 70 years ago, and it's still an iconic play going into the deep well of the Polo Grounds that Bill's talking about. So yeah, you know, baseball no longer really captures our imagination. It doesn't capture our fantasy, the way it does. It did 40 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago. There's really not a comparison to Willie Mays when you talk about modern ball players. The game is played different. It's covered different. It's viewed differently by the fans. But let me promise you, there was a time when Willie Mays had the complete attention of American sports.
You know what? I will agree with you, Tram, about the magic around his name. Of course, I didn't get to see Willie Mays play, but when you hear that name, you think about him being a historical figure. There's a certain aura around when you say the name Willie Mays. So I appreciate you guys sharing your memories of him for sure.